Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of NRL Supercoach Off the Bench. I'm your host, Ross, coach of the Benchwarmers. Tonight on the podcast, I am joined by Timmy. Welcome, Tim.
Evening, gentlemen. Good to be back for another weekend.
And how did you go this week? How was your round?
Had a bit of a cracker, 1284. Unfortunately, I didn't play Will Kennedy this week, which has left a few points on the pine. I've had to play Stefano Udakamano for the last 2 weeks, and he's dropped out some shit scores and then banged out a 69 this week, the week I don't play him. So I think he was my top scoring front row, and I didn't actually play him. So anyway, there's always points left out there, but that's Supercoach. So yeah, 1284, pretty happy. Should be some solid green arrows for me this week after copping about 1,000 place red arrow last week.
Yep. And next we have Guy. Welcome, Guy. How was your week?
Evening, boys. Yeah, similar to Timbo, 1280. Was quite happy with it. Upon reflection, though, I'm looking at a couple of scores. Grant, I think, was my main letdown. I've got him and Cook, which we're going to get to because Grant's on report, which doesn't help. But yeah, Grant was my main letdown. Nakora as well today was the other one. It was quite disappointing. Apart from that, they were all over 50. DFE still was a bit of a dud trading for me 2 weeks ago when I probably should have got KP. But yeah, and Tohu was the other one. Ended up being my last reserve. I probably should have went for the upside. Yeah, and I'm the same. I captained Cleary today. But yeah, I VC'd Teddy. Thought about looping, but Josh Schuster hadn't played yet. If he had already played and put up a 40-odd, I probably would have looped. Yeah. But yeah.
Lastly, we've got a special guest, which is Mark Barnes from the All-Stars podcast. If you haven't tuned into that one, it's a fantastic listen, that one. Whether it's him by himself or whether it's with Billy or Matty Perso as well. We've had a few guests on there. You can find him on all the platforms, YouTube, Spotify, all the other ones like that. Welcome, Mark. It's good to have you back on again.
Cheers, Ross. Thanks, mate. It was good to come on. It's been a little while, so nice to jump on board. My round was, I think, pretty similar to you guys. I ended up with 1277. Ended up changing the captain from Hines to Cleary about 5 minutes before kickoff, which didn't work out, although it didn't end up punishing me like I was thinking that it was going to. I don't think it's ever worked out where you change your captain 5 minutes before kickoff ever for me, and should have learnt my lesson, but I got a bit cold feet. I put it on Twitter as well. I was pretty adamant on Hines over Cleary for much of the week. Had a fair few nice debates with people in the Supercoach world about it and stuff, but I think I put on Twitter the reasons why I changed my mind or why I was considering it was because Cogger wasn't on the bench, which changed things. That really threw me because I thought he's going to play 80 because there's no one else that can play that position. And the other thing too was that the Dogs just had all those changes. So I was like, oh man, none of them even played next to each other. It looked pretty scary. So I just went, I'll just change it. But yeah, the only disappointments for me really were Grant, which was a disappointment for most people. That was probably one of my worst trade-ins that I've done this year. I've denied about it 4 or 5 weeks ago and whether I should bother doing it, whether it was worth it, and I just never should have. But pretty much everyone was good for me until today. Like I had the 134 of Teddy that I should have looped, but he wasn't updated yet. The 122 of Drinky that was there, and most everyone was 50s. And then today, obviously, copped the Sharks wingers and Nakora and stuff as well. So yeah, not a bad round.
Yep. Yeah, most times when Panthers put 44 onto a team, you expect Cleary to at least get 100 in amongst that, but obviously a lot of their play went through Luai as well. I think Cleary seemed to have a really good game, just not Supercoach wise, but it was good to see him back playing. And I think Panthers switched off that last 15 minutes. They probably could have gotten a bit better score. But anyway, all right. Well, I finished with a 1251. I ended up captaining Drinkwater, which worked out well for me because it would have been Hines otherwise because I don't own Cleary. So worked out well for me. I traded in Toto, which was good trade-in. Got me 104. My other trade-in was Val, which I wasn't very happy about because originally I was either going to go Walsh or Teddy and ended up going Val. Originally at one stage I was going to keep just hold on to Gutho, and I wish I had her because he put out 115, but that's Supercoach. You take the good with the bad. That's it. So, all right, moving on. We'll go through the games from the weekend. So the first game was Dragons 18, Tigers 14 in the Wooden Spoon Cup. Lomax 115, Tupu 136, Dane Laurie 106. Other than that, it was a pretty low scoring game. Mark, did you catch this game at all? What did you think of it?
Yeah, I did, but I didn't have any Supercoach skin in the game, so I wasn't that interested in it. I was, I don't know, like sort of Lomax and Tupu were two guys that always through the year seemed like they had a couple of big scores in them here and there, pretty rocks and diamonds, but, you know, very rarely. I think the only one that I was sort of interested in, which I spoke on the All Stars podcast about this week, was just if teams had a lot of trades, Ravalawa looked like he could have been an okay one because I was pretty certain he was going to score a try. He ended up doing that, but it was only a 46, so it wasn't great. But I think he had a minus 40-odd break even or something like that, coming from his massive 150 from the week before. So that was probably the only real interest point of it. As far as the game went, though, it wasn't great for Supercoach. Obviously, 18-14, and even guys that were fairly highly owned in it. You know, Uda Kamanu, I don't think many people would have played. Bateman kind of flopped with 57, which at his price point is very average. And then there really wasn't much else to say about it. Like, I didn't think it was a great game. Wasn't great for Supercoach, and I don't think that there was too much high ownership in it either.
Yeah, I only had Bateman in the game as well, and I opted to watch the cricket instead, so it wasn't really much interest out of that one for me either. I'm not going to lie. Anyway, I'm sure now you're looking at that grin on your face, Guy. You know that they've avoided the wooden spoon now. You're very happy, aren't you?
No, that's what I mean. I'm the same with Barnesy. No, Supercoach investment in the game, but yeah, definitely as a Dragons fan, I was hoping we'd get the win. I had Lomax earlier on in the season, as you boys know, for the buys. But yeah, I had to sell him. The other one that's kind of piqued my interest since he came back at round 12, I think it was Jacob Little. His last 6 games, he's gone 61, 54, 66, 65, 37, 110. And I think of that daunting hooker spot, he hasn't been too bad of a purchase over that period. So one that I could have got, but yeah, in terms of the game, I think it was up and down. The first half was quite a battle, and I think the second half just kind of fizzled out. Wasn't too many highlights, but yeah, was glad to get the win.
Yep. All right, we'll move on to the next game. So it was the Warriors getting the points in Golden Point, 21-20 over the Raiders after they led pretty comfortably. It looked like they were going to do it easy, and then Raiders made a bit of a comeback in this one. Got the win in Golden Point. So SJ got 74, Horse 76, CNK 69, Tohu Harris pretty average with 52, Tarpany 61. Timmy, did you catch this game at all?
Yeah, look, I watched the first half before I had to head off to my own football game. Look, I was, obviously Warriors got off to a good start and then did a Raiders on the Raiders, and they just turned into the bloody New Zealand faders, I guess you could call them. So yeah, it was an interesting one. I think they were out, was 18-0 or something like that, and then the Raiders scored 3 straight tries in the second half, and all of a sudden it was on. So was it 2 tries in the last 1 minute of the game or something, I think, from memory. So yeah, it was an interesting one. I bought Sean Johnson in this week, went Jerome Hughes to SJ, so was relatively happy with that, especially with how Hughes scored. I think he only got a 35 or something in that vicinity. But I really thought SJ was going to turn up in this one. I know a lot of people have still got CNK, so they would have been happy enough with his 69 points. AFB a little bit underwhelming with the 61. But Tohu Harris, I actually put the VC on him when I heard the weather forecast of 30 mil of rain. I was thinking it was going to piss down rain and going to be an absolute bloodbath, but a great game for forwards. Figured it was a good game for Tohu, where he just put the ball under the arm and keep on running. I think in the second half I was driving to my football game and sounded like he was caught just about a metre out from the line. That would have been nice. He was going straight under the post. But yeah, anyway, that's football and that's Supercoach for you. As for the Raiders, I had the Horse with a 76. So I was pretty happy with that. I think, he was my in my front row. So It's interesting with Harris. I'm not really sure what to do with him. He's obviously going to start to bleed a bit more cash, but I don't know. He's got the duel, so he's pretty handy if you've got a duel down in second row. And obviously with Horse and a few other key players being dual as well, it's handy to have him. I want to bring in Payne Haas or Tino. Obviously Tino's still got another couple of weeks, but is it time to bring in Payne? And if so, is Tohu Harris the man to make way for him?
Yeah. What's you guys' thoughts on SJ? We think with them having a bye this week that he's a sell, or you think you can still hang on to him with the draw they've got on the run home?
Oh, you have to hold him for sure. I brought him in for the draw for the run home. They've got just about the nicest run home out of all the teams.
I don't know. I think he's done really well. And there's a chance that he can come up trumps. But I mean, the thing is, like next week when you're having a look at it, Penrith have got the Sharks. And I guess that might make it a bit easier to hold SJ because that could be a bit of a harder game for both. Well, definitely a harder game for Hines. Whether that's a harder game for Cleary remains to be seen. So you could hold off if you don't own Hines, I guess. If you don't own Cleary, though, with how the defence has been for the Sharks the last couple of weeks, particularly in their first halves, might be pretty scary to ride SJ on the bench and not have Nathan Cleary. So I think it's pretty hard because I think SJ's been a really good buy this year, but I'd also rate him as the third best halfback even from now, even with their draw. And I've had these arguments today already with several people, but really all week that, I think it's crazy how much people have written off Nico Hines, and we'll get to the game anyway. But I mean, he's the number one. He's not the number one halfback. He's the number one player in the game by more than 15 points a game. And that's the biggest margin that we've ever seen in Supercoach, I'm pretty sure. Even including the 2021 season when people went nuts. So to fade that when he's matchup proof and his stats for the top 8 and stuff, if you take out if you just look at his top 8 games only, playing teams that are in the top 8, he's still the number one averaging player. If you just count those points, he's 87 points a game, which is better than anybody else in the game. So whether you want to look at him versus top 8 teams or not top 8 teams, he's still number one. So to fade that, it's pretty hard. You're going to fade Nathan Cleary. I would actually probably fade Nathan Cleary and keep SJ over fading Hines. But, I'd just have Cleary and Hines myself. So it's a tough one. And I think that you sort of got a little glimpse in this game of maybe, a solid SJ game that we might see more of in the coming weeks. But he's had a good season.
Yeah. All right, next game.
Interesting that you, sorry, Ross. Interesting you say that, Barnesy, because I was in a chat with a guy in one of my head-to-head groups. He's sitting about 300th or something overall, and he asked me the question about the halfback for the way home. I think I said before I brought SJ in. I actually, when I saw the weather forecast, I didn't bring SJ. I went Cleary, but I actually had SJ and Nico, and then Cleary in as my top 3. I thought with the draw for the run home, I had SJ at number 1. So yeah, look, it's I knew what whether the rain wasn't going to come over in New Zealand, I probably would have gone SJ instead of Cleary, but it makes no difference now. But yeah, look, I think that those 3 probably in that order, and I agree with you. I probably wouldn't have had Cleary in the top 2.
Yeah, I think the thing with it is that SJ has played as well as he possibly can. He's at his absolute ceiling. No one ever thought he could do half as good as this. And credit to him. Like, if he keeps this up, it's an amazing season. But if he keeps it up, he's still behind Hines and still behind Cleary. So, I mean, you're banking on him keeping it up, which he might do because it's a good draw. But if he keeps it up, the numbers say he's still behind the other 2. So I don't, numbers-wise, I don't really get it. He's whereas someone like Hines, as we've seen, like, he can have a terrible game. He got sent to the bin last week and got flogged, and he still scored 74. So, it doesn't matter for him. It makes no difference for Hines.
I think the difference in your case, Timmy, is that you sold Hughes to get to him, whereas if you've already got Nathan and Hines and Cleary, then you wouldn't. There's no need to sell to SJ. Or if you've got SJ, I probably wouldn't sell to the others either at this point, especially with the low trades. But I'm in the same boat with as Cleary and Hines.
All right, next game was South 20, Broncos 36, Stags 136, Walsh 111, Adam Reynolds 92, AJ 82, Cam Murray, for those that picked him up at a nice price under 500k, 76, and Campbell Graham 67. Guy, what do you think of this game? I thought South were good for the first half, but pretty average for the second half, obviously.
Yeah, my main thought was the one that came back to burn me was Tony Staggs, another one who I had earlier on in the season during the bye period. And you all hated me for going there. Reece Walsh also looked good upon return. At his price, it was kind of tempting, but I just thought there were better options at fullback myself. I did buy Murray, well, maybe a month or so back, and he was quite cheap, and ended up playing him, which was good. Haas and Cook, average, nothing too exciting. The ones that I'm looking at are Cody and obviously Latrell this week. Obviously they play the Tigers, Bunnies, so they'll be heavily targeted. So they're two that I'm definitely looking at. But yeah, in terms of the game, I tipped Brisbane. I actually thought with Latrell out that they'd get the win. But yeah, I don't know. I'll go over to Timbo because he's a Broncos fan.
Yeah, look, I still haven't managed to watch the game. The weekend's been too full on. I was on Friday night. Their kick-off the same time as mine. Yeah, look, I was really happy with the result. I'd actually tipped Bunnies until I heard Latrell was out, and then went back onto the Broncos. So yeah, it was good to see Staggs start to come good at the right time of the season. We certainly need him to be firing and have that point of difference going into the finals. Look, Reece Walsh just did Reece Walsh things, which was really good. Sort of repaying the faith after coming off 3 games of stupid suspension. So yeah, look, I picked up Murray this week as well. I actually went Teague Wilton up to Murray, or down to Murray. Sorry, that was good. Banked 50 odd K, which was really handy with his 76. He's just a quality player. If you're looking for someone, especially with his low ownership at the moment, I'll just bring it up right now. His current ownership was, I think it was about 8% before the round. He's now at 16%. So yeah, look, he's still sort of in pod territory. So yeah, I think if South can get back to form with their draw the way that we think they all should for the run home, I think Cam Murray's in for a good finish.
The thing is,
sorry, no, you're right, Mark. Go ahead.
The thing with Cam Murray as well is that I think people need to consider is that there's 2 things with this season so far. One of them is guys like him always the first third of the season, or even the first 2/3 of the season, end up playing less or relied upon less because Souths are generally going well, or you don't know where you're at as a team. They're 8th at the moment. So even though I still rate them as one of the premiership threats, they're 8th. So they're going to need to run home hard, and things like differential is going to matter as well. And what that means is it's probably going to be minutes for him. The other thing that happened to is obviously Origin, but he had his groin injury that he was carrying for the best part of 2 months, and that's gone now. So there's just huge value in Cam Murray at the moment. And the other thing too is finally it's a luxury trade. Like I would love to have done it. It's a trade that I would have done 10 times over this week, but there's just so many other priorities that you had to do, like getting a Nathan Cleary in, or all these other things that you wanted to do. So teams aren't going to be able to do it. So if you've got the luxury of having trade volume, you're going to be able to do ones like that. And, this week, Colin Matangi didn't work out his secondary partner, but you're going to find him at 550K versus the Tigers next week and nobody owning him. And 5 or 6% ownership for Colin Matangi going against the Tigers, it's huge. So if you can balance the trades and you got the volume, because they've obviously got the buy coming up, then guys like him and like Guy said, Cody Walker and stuff, it's absolutely massive. And Alex Johnston, nobody mentioned, but he was 88 and I think he had 81 in the first half or something, which was good signs because Souths were absolutely awful in the second half. So, I mean, he could have 2 halves like that next week and then all of a sudden it's 150.
Yeah, I'm not looking forward to that game.
Another one.
I don't really own many South players either, to be honest with you either. So
the other one we haven't mentioned either is Campbell Graham, now that he's dropping back down in price. I know you are in the season, Roscoe.
Yeah.
A young bloke from Broncos, Xavier Willison, is it? He scored back-to-back games. He's also looked good for a youngster, I thought.
Yeah, no, he pumped out a 50, looking good. I know that that's one that Brad mentioned pre-season too as well. I'm pretty sure as well, one to keep an eye on. So
that was me with I work with his North Devils coach from last year, and he's got a lot of really big raps on X, and also Brendan Piakura, who's gone all right this season for the Bronx as well. So yeah, I think they're certainly stars of the future, and I think they're a little bit less stressed with letting guys like Flegler go with some of those boys coming through.
Well, we don't want him going too hard this year. We want him to start at a reasonable price next year if he is starting. So slow down, son.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, as you said, Mark, Colin Matangi's been a bit underwhelming the last couple of games, but I think you're right at his price. I think, if you've got the cash, he's definitely worth the trade in. If you've got the trades, obviously, most of us, I'm sure, are pretty short and light on for this time of the year, though. Yeah, so we'll see what happens with that one.
It's got to flip around with his numbers, and we've seen it before. It'll flip around for sure. And also, if you don't have trade numbers, he's an alternative to guys like a Nickera and stuff that everybody else is getting on that's highly owned now, because they're going to be more expensive. So if you don't have the money,
I've got Jackson Ford, and he's obviously on the bye next week, and looking for a point of difference player. So it might be a straight swap from Ford to the big koala.
I think he'll turn it around.
Hang on, didn't you already have him and sell him like 3 weeks ago, though?
Yeah, about a month ago, yeah. I
sold him when he got to Origin as well, because I had him for that buy, and then he was in Origin, so it just hurt too much. And you can't. That's one thing that I think a lot of newer coaches don't really get yet, because they don't have the experience of playing for a few years. That it's not just about who's a good sell or the right time to sell people. It's about, I've got to sell somebody to cover a buy round, or I've got to sell someone not to cover this week, but to cover the mini big buy round the following week. And you go through your team like I did, and I was like, well, I'm going to have to sell a South player because, and he wasn't covering the buy. And unfortunately, that's some decisions that you got to make in the last month or two that are going to be players that you wish that you could have held, but you've only got to score to 25 and you can't do it.
Yeah, that's
exactly right.
This year's been different to every other year with having the buy as well. And, there's players that we haven't wanted to sell that we've had to sell. And, we've sold guns that we probably didn't want to sell, but we had to sell them, and then we can bring them back. Like we had, the luxury of that this year. So, yeah.
I've really enjoyed that, though, because it's added a different facet to the game that we haven't had for a few years now. And it's actually made it a lot more challenging. I think you can have a look now at the guys that are in the top 1,000. And a lot of those guys are just about out of trade. So, look, it's I think there'll be a fair bit of movement in the overall scale of things over this last 5 or 6 weeks, just simply because of that. Some guys have gone too hard too early. Right through Origin, I actually did really well through the buy rounds and planned really well. Unfortunately, Kaloa Matangi was one of the guys that I just had to let go, because in that last buy round, just the numbers got ugly. Guys got selected that we didn't think would, and I had a lot of guys in my squad just for that last round that unfortunately I was banking on them to play, and they couldn't.
Yep. All right, move on to the next game. Titans 18, Roosters 36. Teddy well and back in form with 134. Egan Butcher was fantastic with 113. Randall 96, Clark 88, Suwali 85. Collins was outstanding again with an 83. There's a few scores we can go through there. Feeder 57, didn't play the game out. I got taken off early. We may as well go to you, Mark, being the Roosters fan. You think it was a case of Titans playing Roosters back into form, or you just thought the Roosters were pretty much on this game?
I thought they were really on. That's the best half of football they've played all year by a mile. And there were several telling factors. I don't ever think the Titans were doing anything wrong. They ran half a dozen different plays in that game that they've never run before this year. Or they've run before this year, but they haven't run this year, I should say. And it was really good to see, because most of the time, if you have a look at why the attack's so bad, they're doing a lot of individual stuff and guys aren't in the right spots and guys aren't hitting holes and stuff. And as a Roosters fan, I actually said to a mate of mine that I was watching it with at the time, have a look at all the support. Whenever anyone was running, they were punching and they were half going through and just being held on to. But there was guys punching on either side of the ball and coming through. And that hasn't happened all year. Like often there's no support players. And there's also the plays that were run and the hands and stuff. Like there was one that got pulled up for Collins because he got the ball kicked out, but it went from Teddy to the right to Hargraves and then back inside. And then they did the same play again with Tedesco back inside, that he made a line break that was an out inside play in the ruck area that they used to do every game for like 5 years with Tedesco. And you've barely seen it once this year. So they were running all these different plays and variations to the attack that you haven't seen before. And it was working. And they were also catching the passes and not making errors. And the discipline was pretty good. So a lot of the time, I think if you look past before this week, if they had possession and it didn't convert, they'd get the shits, they'd make mistakes, they'd give away penalties, they'd get frustrated, and then all of a sudden the other team would get points on the board first, even though possession was like 80-20 Roosters. And that could have happened this week, but it didn't. They knuckled down and they just kept doing what they were meant to and didn't make mistakes. So I thought it was great. I thought Tedesco has low-key been back in form really for 6 weeks, and people have sort of overlooked that fact. I think he had an 86 5-round average before this week anyway, including 2 tons out of the last 5 games, only 1 bad score. So I already thought that he was coming back, and he was already super cheap, and he was only 10% ownership. So I actually bought him this week, and I'm really happy with it going forward. The Roosters have a pretty good draw going forward, and they need to win. So I quite like that. I think when we talk about luxury trades, Suaalii, I would have loved to have brought in. He's only 425,000 goal kicking. He was a great hand grenade this week because he's back on the wing. He's been really bad this year, but people need to remember he's been really bad as a centre, and he's a terrible centre. He's back on the wing now, and he's got goal kicking, so it's a huge difference. And the one that's gone completely under the radar, and I'll stop talking about the Roosters in a minute, but Butcher, he had a big score again on the weekend, and he had 3 weeks in a row before this week of going 60s just in raw base only. So if he continues that 80-minute role, he will be a massive point of difference. So we'll probably have a possibility of being better than most other second-row forwards with big names that you think are stars and guns. He could outscore half of them on the run home.
Yeah, he was one I mentioned on the pod last week, actually, even Butcher as a nice pod as well. So, but I
think is he the better of the 2 brothers for the run home? Do you reckon, Barnesy?
It's definitely Nat Butcher. But in saying, Egan only came in because of the late withdrawal. He had someone withdraw.
Bradley was out.
Bradley withdrew. Yeah. Bradley's another one. He's been doing really well on the edge since he's converted as well. But Angus Crichton's due back in the next 2 weeks, so it's really going to muddy the waters. So one thing with Nat Butcher is he's the better player. He's the one that's ahead of Egan, but at the same time, he can also go to the bench. He's just managed to keep hanging on to his job all year. Like something has happened throughout the whole season where he's kept playing, so if that keeps happening, he'll be great. There's always the risk that he ends up on the bench in a 40-minute role though, and that'll kill him.
Quick question while you're on here, Barnesy. Look, obviously Lindsay Collins, he's quite cheap. Is he an alternative to any of the big name front rowers for the trip home? And then also Brandon Smith. Obviously the cheese has been pretty shit this season. He's under 400K, but in a case like mine where I've got Sonny Luke and probably going to miss Harry Grant for the next week or 2, is there a world where I look at Sonny Luke up to Brandon Smith, or am I just clutching at straws?
I think that it's always good to look at everything as long as you don't do everything. And that would be one of the everythings that I definitely wouldn't do. So, I hate the look of Brandon Smith this year. And he looked better on the weekend. He had a really good run where he put the afterburners on and went straight up the ruck and made a break and set up Teddy. He looked really good, but him and Turpin, they're going to share it too much. I actually think Connor Watson might be due back in 2 weeks as well. That's going to be interesting because if he comes back into the side, that's another alternative too. But yeah, I couldn't do it, and I couldn't do it on Collins either. I just think that there's probably too many other options. Like even with
with Matt Lodge leaving, did that mean that there was necessarily any more minutes for Lindsay Collins, especially with Uriah Hargraves as loose as he is?
Well, if he gets suspended or something, then yeah, there probably will be. But I think it's hard because one of the things with Lindsay is that he can play bigger minutes, and when he does, it's great. But at the same time as well, like you just see him throw up pretty similar numbers throughout it, and there's a lot of 40s and 50s in there. He went well on the weekend, but you can give me an extra 5 minutes and it's still probably not going to be enough. Like he's 52 on the season. There's too many other guys like a Joe Tarpany is going to start dropping down now with that 61 that he's thrown up. I think that he's a good final. I actually think the Raiders are pretty good for the final stretch of the season. Like I would bet on a Tarpany or a Horsburgh over even some of the more fancy guys like a Payne Haas. Like he could beat those guys. So I'd rather be doing those sort of moves, or he's not doing any moves at all. And that's probably one of the things. Like I'd stuff around with a Lindsay Collins hand grenade or a Brandon Smith hand grenade at the start of the year to let me do other stuff, or even in the middle of the year. But I think at the end of the year, you can't afford it because these guys are a little bit too all over the shop and a little bit too middling to bother burning the trade.
I'm with you, Barnesy. I think Timmy's just picking up the scraps at the very loose, very, very bottom of the barrel. But I actually like the Suwali trade. Would you do Manu to Suwali to free up about 300k?
I actually would. Like, it sounds super insane. I sold Manu a couple of weeks ago because he was, when was it? Was they on a buy or something? And yeah, there was the big buy round, and he wasn't playing. And like back at centre, he'll have good games. Like he had a good game on the weekend, but he's going to have some pretty poor ones at centre. So for that value, I think you're better off selling him. And Suwali could probably match him or come within 5 points. And if he comes within 5 points of him, especially with the goal kicking, which he should keep all year now that Sam Walker's out, then all of a sudden you're like, oh, well, it's 5 points off, but I'm not going to play Suwali every week. And I got 300 grand to put somewhere else and make like, Junior Tino into Payne Haas or something. It's just, I think it's those sort of trades can be really good for the run home.
Yeah.
All right, next game for me was probably upset of the round. It was Newcastle 26, Melbourne 18. Ponga 96, Munster 97. Brazil, another one going under the radar with an 88. Bradman Best, another pod with an 82. And Marzu sticking solid again with a 79. Guy, we'll go to you for this one. What do you make of this game?
Yeah, like you, I was quite surprised with the scoreline. Very disappointed, as I said earlier, with Harry Grant. I've had him and Cook since I think between Origin 2 and 3, and I've just decided to stick with it for the year. But yeah, he's just not just doesn't have the base, like the tackles and the runs. He's just not getting involved as much. Cameron Munster bought in last week, finally came good, which was good to see. And yeah, the one that's just been burning me watching is Kalen Ponga. I thought, finally he's going to have a quiet week running up against Melbourne. And then, he ends up almost hunting up. So that was disappointing. I've got Marzu and definitely holding him for the whole year. I think he's almost a play every week, not just on matchup with his base. And then, Gagai and even Bradman Best. There's quite a few odds at Newcastle that you could go there. Dom Young even.
I think they've still got 4 games left at home as well, or something. I think Newcastle as well, something like that. I'm pretty sure. Sure, they've got a few games still left at home. So
they've got 4 in a row. They've got round 24 to round 27.
There you go. There you go.
I'm sure Barnesy's going to love Dom Young at Roosters next year.
Oh, I loved the signing. Even before he was any good, I liked it. Like I actually commented on Dom Young when he debuted and stuff, and I thought that he was really had some really special qualities that could translate really well after he got a bit of experience and stuff. So I've been into him this year at Supercoach. Like you could get him for 400 and something before, and he had these big try scoring games in him. And Newcastle have actually got quite a decent run home. Like the next few weeks, they've got Canberra, which is a bit harder, but then the Dolphins and the Bulldogs is actually at McDonald Jones Stadium, and they've got the Dragons in the last round. So it's like it's a pretty good run, and I see everyone, like including Timmy, mentioning that he went for Bow Holmes, and certainly I understand why, but everyone seems to be going for these big, happy to pay all this money for these centre wings and stuff this year, but nobody talks about Marju. And it's like, he's had a 39 and a 42 as his lowest scores. Guys are 100% right. You play him every week. And if he gets a try, he's close to a ton. Like a lot of centre wings are like, if he gets a try, you'll get, 60 to 70s. Marju is like 90s to 100s with a try. Like he just kills it. So he's such a good buyer. It's 16% going into this round, I think it was. So there's some good nights, guys.
I see him as like a top, I think a very similar player. Like you're just watching his game over the weekend, he was so heavily involved, and at any stage, every time he got the ball, he looked like he could have busted through and scored. So, yeah, like he's a great player. I've had him for most of the season, and really happy to have had him.
What do you think about Bradman Best, Mark? I think he's worth jumping on now with their run home. I mean, he was 630, but he had a break even of -5 and pumped out 82, so he'll go up to bit over 700 now, probably about 710. You think he's an option, or you think Marzu's the better one of the two?
Oh, 100% Marzu, 100%. And to be honest, like I would have liked Bradman best as a bit of a shot in the dark probably a few weeks ago, but now I think he's priced himself out of the market. Like he's played some good
Especially
games
when
this
it's
year,
pickups.
they've all been like a lot of 40s and 50s and stuff, and you're going to get a lot of that. He's been on a try scoring spree as well. I couldn't go near him in the 700s.
No one you can get Suoli for 400. Like it's crazy.
All right, we'll go to the next game. Cowboys 24, Parramatta 16. Para did come back a bit in this one, but obviously the Cowboys were already far enough ahead. Drinky with a 122, Gutho 115. Valamai 79. Cardi keeps ticking along with a 73 as well. And then we had some highly owned players, Moses 64, Hopwood 63, Val 50. Wasn't much else there other than that. Go to this one on Timmy. What do you think of this game?
Yeah, look, it's I honestly thought that Cowboys were going to put on a few more points than they did. So it's a little bit closer than I thought. I actually don't own any Cowboys, which I put in our group chat the other night saying I hope the Eels put a cricket score on, even though I tipped the Cowboys. Look, Drinkwater, I had him at the start of the season. He got injured for a game and I had to drop him. And, unfortunately didn't find the way to get back on. He just keeps going like a freight train. You can just about bank on a ton for him every week. I know Brad looped him this week and came out trumps. So, yeah, look, hats off to anyone who's got him. I really wish I could get him. He's now over $1 million or whatever the hell he is and can't find a way to get him. Geez, I wish I could, though.
He's going to go up again. Not
Yeah,
even break
yeah,
even. He's going to bet more.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So he's the most expensive player in the game, and it's he's not even like one of those players where you can justify selling him and saving $400K to go somewhere else because he's just banging out tons for fun. So if you've got him, you really need to hold on to him. It's pretty hard to justify splitting his money and going somewhere else unless you reckon you're going to come out 50 to 100 points in front every week.
But you look at his last 5 games, he's got Titans, Broncos, Sharks, Dolphins, and Penrith. Now, other than probably the Broncos and Penrith, he could easily over 100 in all those games, I reckon.
But I think even against the Broncos, as hard as it is, I think he's.
I was about to say, forget about the Broncos. He'll put it on them too.
Yeah, absolutely. He's that kind of electric player that he'll just go absolutely fucking bonkers.
The last time we played him was the game he got injured, I think, and he got 1 or something. So can't really gauge anything off that. So yeah.
But he's been so much up-proof, though.
You played Penrith earlier in the season in round 16 and got a 95 as well.
But even that 4-game run, mate, like before that, like he had Parramatta, who were going good, and that was at CommBank Stadium. He had Melbourne, then he had Penrith, and then he had Souths. And this was like up between round 13 and round 17. So it was when, there were some Origin guys out and stuff here and there, but those teams didn't have, they're all going pretty well. And he went 117, 104, 95, and 140. And 3 out of those 4 games were against top 4 teams. And one of them was Para, who was like charging at CommBank Stadium. It's ridiculous. He's matchup proof at the moment.
There's no way I'm going to be selling him, that's for sure. Yeah. That was the only upside about Walsh suspended the other week that it was able to get me to drink.
I've had Guth over a couple of months too, and I sold him this week too, and I hate myself for doing it. But I got Teddy, so I won, and I also banked a heap of cash. So I got like 400K in the bank because I did that. But at the same time, I sort of wanted Gutherson this week and next week to go low. Because he's then got the Dragons, and that's going to be the big one. Like Gutho could go 150. So it was 2 hard matchups. I sort of thought, Gutho can go not as good, and Teddy's got the Titans, and I think that he can go well. But I'm pretty scared that I sold Gutherson because he killed it in this game again.
Was it Moses 64? I think with 2 tries as well. So not a good score for him.
He was on for a low score. He got them quite late.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think many people own him now since Origin.
Well, the interesting thing in this game too, just to mention, is that the Eels set a record for the most offloads this year. They had 28 offloads, and it was absolutely frantic. Like the Cowboys had 4 offloads, the Eels had 28. I think the season best was 24 or something. So if they keep doing that, because it looked like a mantra, because they were all trying to do it heaps, then that could be really interesting going forward. I think Gutherson had 6 offloads himself. Madison had 5, and Sean Lane's gone. So whether they decide to shuffle those edges around, Bryce Cartwright's played on both edges this year, I think. Madison could be a starting edge, and Madison had 5 himself in offloads with a 55 that was probably low scored, having a look at the game. So it's a couple of interesting things in that game for the Eels.
Looking at the offloads, I've got here Bryce Cartwright got 28 points in offloads, so that'd be 7 offloads, and he got a 73 all in base, so he's done quite well.
He's one that people should have kept. I sold him, and I wish I kept him. Like if you take the name away and have a look at what he's done, he's got a 5-round average of 71 and a 3-round average of 75 at the moment as a second row forward, and it's pretty impressive what Cartwright's done.
Yeah. Shocking injury. Just on Sean Lane, shocking injury. Another bad injury for him too. The poor bloke can't take a trick at the moment.
Yeah, look, I just had a really quick look at Matto. He's at 525 and had a 70-something BE this week. So he's basically going to be at 500K or thereabouts. Is he a trade-in? If Lane's gone and Matto goes into second row and plays 80 minutes.
It's a no-brainer.
Yeah,
for me, I've sung Matto's praises all year, and I get hassled when he's going well, and I get hassled when he's not. So I mean, it doesn't make any difference. People just don't buy him and don't like him. But he had 2 games at 6, which both floundered. Like I was hoping for clutch attack in those, and it didn't happen, and that's going to happen. So he scored 40s, and then he had one other game that was poor, and people were like, "Oh, he's going terrible," and it's like, well, he just had 2 games at 6. It's his first game back in the pack, and it's not really something to base it off. So I tended to think he was going to come back this week and be a bit better. But if he's playing 80 minutes on an edge, he's an absolute weapon. And for 500,000, it's Cam Murray territory. Like it's a gun that you can start in your 17 the whole time and can have a massive run home. And he's going to be like 6-7% owned. And he's got pedigree and he's 500,000. You can make hundreds of thousands of dollars in a downgrade. Like I just see it as a great trade.
Yeah.
I don't mind providing starting though. Like a Hopgood or a Nakora even, who's highly owned, down to him and bang 200K. But yeah, he's too good as a utility for his own good, which ends up being shifted around a lot. He's played 5'8", he's played bench, he's played all over the place.
So the Eels run home. They've got the Cowboys, the Storm, and then they had the Cowboys this week. They got the Storm next week. St. George in 23 for the first round of head-to-head knockouts. Then Broncos 24, Roosters 25, and Panthers 26. Obviously, they got the bye in round 27, so he's not going to help you for that very last round. But yeah, look, that's not a bad draw for the Eels.
I think it's all right for the forwards. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I sold Gutho, because I looked at the draw. And if you've already got like 2 or 3 Eels, you can't do it because round 27 is just a killer unless you've got heaps of trades up your sleeve. But it should be all right for Matto.
All right, we'll go to the next game. Panthers 44, Dogs 18, Total 104, Yo 88, Luai 86, Peachy. For those who somehow held him, I wish I didn't hold him, but I would, 80 points for him. Sorensen was solid again with a 78, and Cleary with a 70. Timmy, did you catch this game today?
I was just having a laugh at one of the things that came through in one of our chats. Some guys giving Corey Parker some shit. Scored 687 for the round. Anyway,
I don't think he touched his team because he had Cleary and a heap of other guys sitting on his
poor Cozza, the poster boy for Supercoach, gets a 687. Unlucky. I love him as a player, Supercoach. God. Anyway, sorry, Roscoe, what was your question, mate?
Did you catch the game before?
Today's game? Yeah, look, I was doing yard work. I was listening to it on the radio, which I was really interested to see the actual game itself, because they kept talking about Cleary and he seemed to be involved in everything. Look, he currently scored a 70. I went, like I said, I went Hughes to Cleary when I thought the weather forecast in NZ was going to be ugly. So, look, I'm happy enough with Cleary. He got through his 80 minutes. It sounded like he was involved. He had the kicking back, which was really good to see as well. That was probably my biggest question. I really wasn't sure whether they were going to leave it with Crichton or give it back to Cleary when he was fit and available. So, look, I'm glad he's got the kick and tee back. But a 70 after having a few weeks out, I think you've got to be pretty happy with that one. Brian To'o, yeah, look, I think I was the only one in our group that didn't bring To'o in, and it's just because I had bigger fish to fry. Isaiah Yo, I talked about him on the podcast last week with an 88. I think Yo is a great pod for the run home. Currently sitting at 9% ownership. So yeah, look, 689. We know the player he can be. He bangs out 70s and 80s for fun when he's on. So look, I can see a world where you go a bit of a pod play and go Isaiah Yo for the run home. Outside of that, Luai, as much of a knob as he is, he plays so much better when Nathan Cleary's back in the team. Good to see Sorrow scoring some points with a 78. As for the Dogs, look, Karaz, if you've held him, I think he's going to go all right in a losing team most weeks. Jake Avarillo is going to be an interesting one and heading off to the Dolphins next year, but still seemed to play really well today. Outside of that, there wasn't too much to have a chat about. Look, Dylan Edwards is one that I've been keeping my eye on. I've got Kennedy. My plan next week was to go Kennedy to Dylan Edwards with the Panthers back at full strength. He only got a 65 this week, so I'm not really sure on that one now.
Probably too many guys with ceilings now in the fullback spot. We went from 3 months ago having no one at fullback that we could trust to there now being guys that are punching hundreds out every week, because you can count Kalen Ponga as a fullback as well now. So Ponga, Drinkwater, Gutherson are all killing it. Tedesco has scored 3 tons in his last 5 or 6 games, and it's all of a sudden Edwards that's been left in the dust, and Latrell's coming back next week. So
and you can probably throw Reece Walsh in amongst that mix too.
You throw Reece Walsh in too. So I think there's like half a dozen in front of Edwards. I couldn't do it. Like Edwards will be solid. He's not going to give you a bad score, but at the moment, the guys that are jumping everywhere and having big rounds are the ones that have got the Drinkwaters and the Pongas and all these guys. And you're going to have some of those guys that you don't have if you're looking at Edwards, and I'd buy them instead. Even just wait a week and buy Gutherson for that St. George game. You know, there's some big fullbacks at the moment.
Yeah, I'm with you, Barnesy. I don't really see the appeal in Edwards. I was really happy with To'o, obviously. I thought, like I said last week, it was crazy people paying 100K more for Targo. And yeah, for the Dogs, I bought Kiraz back, kind of like a Suwali move I did a month or so back, just because he was cheap and he'd lost all his money, and I had him at the start of the year, and just to make a bit of cash. But he's sitting as like a 5th or 6th and a wing, and he's not too bad. The other one was Skelton. He's only basement price. He put up a decent score. I was kind of hoping he just stays basement price until next year, but it's going to be quite annoying. He'll make a little bit of cash.
It's the other thing that today did too with some of the guys that you guys have mentioned, like Timmy mentioned Yo and stuff, and I think that's a really good shout from the pod last week. But the problem is that Penrith are going so well. Like, one of the reasons that Cleary didn't do much today is because they just did it too easy. Like, they were scoring points before he could even get the ball, and it was just too easy. And unfortunately, we might see a bit more of that. And when you do, they're ahead of the comp by so far. Like, people have put the Storm and stuff up there as contenders. No one's near Penrith still. And what's going to happen at the end of the year when you've got guys like Edwards that have actually soldiered through the whole season and pulled them through the origin period and stuff and hasn't had a rest yet? What's going to happen with an Isaiah Yo that's a bit older now and going to be pretty war-torn and stuff, and we saw last year get rested at the end. So I'm pretty wary on some of these Penrith buys, not because I don't think they'll go well, but just because, you know, you're going to cop a week or two at the end maybe where you don't have them, and it could be in head-to-head grand finals, and that could be pretty tough.
Yeah, I agree, mate. I think that's going to be a big issue this year, even though they've brought the finals sort of forward. So in the past, it's been in the last week of the season. Now that they've brought it forward to head-to-head finals in round 25, look, I'm not necessarily sure, especially once looks like Broncos and Panthers are probably going to stitch up the top 2 spots or close to it. And then I think once the top 4's set, I can see players being rested, and that might be as early as round 23, 24. They'll just go through a rotation, simple as that.
And that
Yeah, I think-
top four could be set next week too, because there's quite a gap between fourth and fifth now. I think as well. I think it's about 4 points or something between fourth and fifth as well. So, yeah.
Especially after the Broncos beat the Roosters next week, there'll be a nice gap there.
I think that you're on. I think you were first or second last year, and we beat you 44-6 or something. And you're actually
that's
playing.
last
You're
season.
actually on
You're
fire.
You're
or
only as
something.
good as your last game.
All right, talking about the last game, it was Sharks 26, Manly 30. Manly nearly bottled this one up. They were leading 30-6 with about 15 minutes to go, and Sharks made their comeback and left it too late. Don't know why they put that kick through at the end when they should have just passed it out. Mulatalo was out there unmarked pretty much. I think they had 3-on-1, and he put some stupid kick into nobody chasing it, and that was that. Kula 97, Kennedy 95, Cherry Evans 96. Ramian, for those who played him, solid with an 84. Croker's another one who's been chiming along nicely with an 82. Garrick 79, and then Hines 79. And the other one that was very disappointing in this game, obviously, was Nikora as well for the Sharks with 36. Cody, you on this one, Guy? How'd you see this game?
Yeah, I was hoping it would be a more one-sided affair to the Sharks. Manly came out strong early, the likes of DCE. I mean, I know we've got the Hines and Cleary and SJ now, but DCE is not too far behind. It's just you couldn't do it. He'd only be an Origin cover if he somehow retired from playing Origin. But I actually didn't play Garrick this week and decided to play Ramian over him in thinking that Sharks at home would score more points than Manly. And he just outscored him, but it didn't really matter too much. Nico, I mean, he's similar to Nath anyway with the captaincy, so it wasn't too big of a swing. And then, Nikora was disappointing, as you said. Ronaldo got some late points, which saved him. I sold Kennedy last week to Teddy, so it wasn't too much different to you boys selling Gutho to Teddy. And then, the one that surprised me was the young back rower who filled in for Wilton's spot, put up a almost, mid-50s, and he's almost basement price, but dual as well, which was handy. But, in terms of the game, I thought, Sharks should have won, but they're just in massive decline at the moment. And coming into Penrith next week is going to be a tough ask.
We saw in the second half, they sort of came back a little bit and played how we thought that they were going to play in the first half, which was what was disappointing as well. If they started like that, it could have been into a smash up. I don't think a lot of people, the Eagles have gone under the radar a little bit. I've been heaps down on them because 3 out of their last 4 games have scored in single digits. I think they've averaged 9 points in the last month of football, the last 4 games over the last 5 weeks, I should say. So 9 points a game. They haven't been able to score any points at all. And that's meant that I have not been interested in Manly players at all, but that's why I thought the Sharks would go well this week. And they've let them put up 30 in the first half. But at the same time, in the second half, and the game was on the line, Manly scored 0. So I'm pretty down on Manly players. And this week didn't do anything to, change my mind. They've only got 1 game at home, Manly, in the next 5. They do have a game against the Dragons. Then they've got 3 tougher ones in the middle. And then they've got 1 against the Bulldogs in the next 5 games. But those 3 in the middle, and the fact they've been struggling to score points so hard post-turbo, it's pretty tough for Manly players for Supercoach, I reckon.
I think you can get on Manly players if you're an overall player, but maybe certainly not for a head-to-head player. I think if with the Roosters in 23 and the Panthers in 24, even the Warriors at 25, round 25 is a bit of a tough ask. I mentioned DCE last week when we were talking about him in the podcast, and I stand by that. This time of year, he just seems to come good. After Origin, he seems to grow an extra leg every year. But look, he's one of a few, and I think Manly just seem to be a little bit short on stock. I mentioned Lachlan Croker last week as well. An 82, you've got to be pretty happy with that. I know a lot of people weren't playing Garrick this week, which is exactly why I played him. But look, outside of that, Ola Kawatu, 74, so good to see him starting to get back into some form. I think he went over the line as well early in the game and got denied. So, look, he's not far off a ton thereabouts. It was good to see Matt Lodge have a first game out for Manly. Obviously, super coaches. I mean, he scored 59 points or whatever, but super coach aside, it was good to see Matt Lodge find a home after the Roosters gave him the early exit. And I think between him and buddy, what's his name, the long-haired git, it must be just about the oldest front row forward pack in the comp. Just about, I'd imagine.
Yeah, Matty Lodge put up about a 60, but it was him and Woodsy going around.
Sharon Woods.
Aloi and Paseka both got injured, and you might find that Aloi, if he requires shoulder surgery, could be out for the year. So
I think
Paseka's will be at least a couple of weeks too, but they're saying an MCL for him as well.
Well, I've still got Sean Keppie, and I'm pretty stoked if their forward pack seems to be falling off a cliff. So Keppie's going to be a really handy second row forward, front row forward duel for the run home.
On Olakawadu, I'm pretty sure he's tri-state, didn't it? Because he did his hot burpee as his
he did the try. Yeah,
try.
he did. Yeah.
No,
there was another one where he was
but I
over
thought
the
they were
line.
denied one early on.
He was sort of close. He was close to the line. The thing with the Manly scores though is that they put up. Excuse me. They had like 67% possession in the first half. So like you give any team in the comp 67% possession in a half of football, they're going to score mass super coach points if they're putting points on the board, and they should be because it's mass possession. And like Manly's points in the second half are pretty poor. So I'm sounding like I hate Manly, but it didn't sway me too much because the Sharks were so bad defensively in the first half, and Manly just had so much ball.
I wonder if they still pay the Try July donation if the try gets taken off them.
No, they still did it. They still paid out the one that with Nico celebrated the other week. They still paid that to them.
Great. It's a great initiative. I think more companies should come involved for other months and maybe sponsor charity and do it.
It was actually fantastic. I watched the Tigers game against the Eels in the women's competition today, and well done to the Tigers winning their first game.
You had to find a way to get that in there, didn't you?
Well,
typical Tigers fan. Take the wins you can get.
No, my point was that they did it. They were also included in the try celebration thing, and nearly every single try that the Tigers scored was a post-try celebration. It was great to see. So, shout out to the players. They're doing a great job, and it's all for a great cause for Nathan Stapleton, and also I can think of the other one. Who was the other one again?
Chris Anderson.
Daniel Anderson, yeah.
Daniel
Anderson, sorry.
And before I forget, our multi this week, we were so bloody close again to nailing another multi this week for charity. We had DWZ score a try, we had Teddy score a try, we had Toto score a try, and Mulatalo, but Talangi went over the line, but it was disallowed, unfortunately, due to obstruction, I think it was. So close to winning some more cash for the charity. That would have been about another $300. So, yeah, we got the other one. We obviously got the one the other week that's fantastic, and I'm actually off to hand over the money tomorrow to the Children's Hospital at Sydney. So I will, get someone to video of me handing over the cash, and we'll just do a quick shout out and stuff, and we'll post the video up on the page either tomorrow or Tuesday. So thanks again to Bluebet. Fantastic sponsor, and we appreciate everything that you're doing for us and to the page as well. So thank you very much to Brett and the other guys. Appreciate it. All right, well, that's it for the games from the weekend. I guess we'll look through now. Are we looking ahead at all for trades or VC or Cs or anything for this week, or we've got no idea at this stage?
Definitely.
Anyone want to go?
That's so after Tuesday.
I've already locked in one. Bringing in Latrell. I've got only about 100K in the bank, and I wanted to go Ramian, I think, out of my centre wings up to Latrell, so I can bring Garrick back down and run Trell and Tedesco. It means I've carried Wilton through this week, so it means having to make money off Wilton to afford it. So I'm not sure on my second trade yet, but I'm definitely going to bring in Latrell.
What about that bloke from the Sharks? Might be all right too. Whatever he is, 230K is a nice downgrade for you for Wilton.
Yeah, Jesse Calhoun. He's dual as well. So I think it's all about Souths and the Cowboys. And I've been sort of eyeing this off for a couple of weeks. Souths and Cowboys this round is going to be huge. So Drinkwater plays the Titans last, and that's going to be a massive captaincy option versus the Titans, especially when you have like Hines and Cleary going head to head versus each other. So that'll probably be my captaincy. But then you've got the Tigers and Souths as a second game, the first Friday night kickoff. And that's going to be massive as well. And you got guys like Alex Johnston, who we spoke about a few other Souths guys as downgrades, like Cam Murray and Colin Matangi, that are around the 500K point, along with someone like Matto. He's just gone down to around 500K as well in AJ. So he could be big as well. And you guys mentioned Campbell Graham earlier as well. There's so many good Rabbitohs buys, but just got to be careful if anyone's looking at those trades that they can afford to have them with the round 26 buy that the Rabbits have. That's the only little caveat.
I'm probably, depending on, I mean, geez, anything could happen after the Sharks had their loss today and the way that they played against Manly with that left-hand side. It's interesting. They dropped Talakai because of the left-hand side defence, and then Manly went down there all day today and scored points still. So maybe Talakai wasn't the problem to begin with. So if Talakai's named on the bench again, or if he's not in the 13, I'll probably go Talakai, maybe down to Solii, and then I think that'll give me enough cash to probably just squeeze in Kennedy to Latrell.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to be VC Trell into Captain Cleary at home against Cronulla. I'll back him in to go better than the Dog.
I say I'll be much the same.
Yeah. I was pretty down on Latrell this week for people bringing him in, but I'm like more into it next week. So I don't want people to think that I'm going back on what I said on my podcast. But Latrell, I still think like there's a bit of risk there with him coming back, considering the nature of the injury and how fit he is normally and stuff. And he generally comes back. You saw it at the start of the year. I was talking about on the All Stars podcast. He averaged like 63 or something the first month or whatever of football for this season, and he's always a bit underdone. He's going to be 12 weeks out with a calf complaint. Like that's a lot of football for Latrell. And when it's different, if it's a shoulder or something, they can run still. If it's a leg, they can't run. Like he hasn't been sprinting until the last week or two. So I think it's a big worry. But because it's the Tigers, you can kind of throw half of it out the window and not worry as much. So like I see it a lot more this week. I wasn't on board with it. Next week, I should say. I wasn't on board with it this week because of the opposition and stuff. It's a bit harder against the Broncos, but Tigers, it'd be nice if we can get some mail maybe from Wacko or something during the week that he's actually goal kicking. That's the other key, because he's got a leg strain. Like you might find that he doesn't goal kick, and that could be another one where you go, I'm not quite as sure now.
Well, Barnesy, Heffron's only about 10 minutes from my place. Maybe I need to sneak down there and just get the binoculars out and see whether he's practicing his goal kicking or not.
Yeah, just dress up as a tree, mate, and just sit there.
It's funny because I ran into him like 2 weeks ago at a South Open day that they had, and he said he was going to be fine to play this week. So, but for an injury that they said was only going to keep him out for 2 weeks, and he hasn't played since round 12, it's obviously, I think there's a bit more to it, if you ask me, than just a calf injury. So
I reckon he had a tear. I reckon he had a small tear and it hasn't healed. And that's one of the things with Latrell too. Like there's guys that are fast healers that always come back early, and there's guys that are the opposite. Yeah. He's always been the opposite. He never comes back early. He never heals fast. And, where some people say, that's to do with his fitness and stuff. It might be, but there's just some guys that just don't heal fast, and he seems to be one of them.
Well, he hadn't even been training 2 weeks ago either. I think it was only this week that he'd actually even started training too.
They're playing.
That's the other thing too. He might have been too unfit. Like the coach might have said, I can't play you because you're not fit enough.
They're playing, although I know it's Tigers' home game, but I'm pretty sure they're playing in the country.
Tamworth. Yeah, Tamworth, yeah. They've actually got a horrible road trip coming up south. Like they are not home until round 27 against Roosters. They go to Tamworth, they go to Cairns, they go to Perth. There's somewhere else there as well, and then they've got their last game at home against the Roosters. So it's a massive road trip for them. And all these games are very vital. Like they're not even in the 8 now. Like they're sitting in 9th spot. Like it's not ideal, but I think they'll still make the 8. But they're definitely not going as well as I thought they would. No, they are missing Latrell, and they were underdone by over Origin missing so many players as well. So
Well, Cody's the other one in that team too. Like if you don't have Latrell and you're scared to bring him in, he's another vice captaincy option against the Tigers.
Well, the only South player at the moment I own is Munro, and there's no guarantees he's going to play next week with his minor injury that he's got. So
I was just about to say the same thing.
Yeah.
I'm hoping to God that Munro gets named next week.
I might have to. I might jump on AJ next week. I might sell Molatalo and just go to either AJ or Campbell Graham. I think I'm too scared to not own any South players against my crappy team. So it's a bit of a concern. So yeah. But look, I'll have a look at my trades and see what I'm going to do. VC and C, no idea. I'll probably captain Drinky definitely against the Titans, but VC not sure yet on that one. We'll have to wait and see what happens.
Maybe. What about David Fafita against the?
They're playing Cowboys. They're playing Cowboys.
Yeah, is it a derby? I think he'll be. I think he's more inclined to be up for. He's just due for a big.
I'll stick to Drinky as captain in that one. For sure.
I don't know.
boys,
David, my plan was to get David Fafita this week, and I don't know if I didn't say it because I'm not sure whether I'm locked into it or not yet. Because it's.
Do you think he's a must-have now with that run home that they've got? It's a bloody terrible draw they've got.
I think he is because he's the second best player in the game on averages, but it's just that you might buy him but not get what you pay, like his average. I think he's at 85 average before this round, and maybe he averages 75 instead. But the thing is, at the second row forward, that it puts him back to the pack, and because he's got the upside, I think that you just take it if he's going to score the same as the other couple of guys. You just take that because he's got the upside where he could go ballistic still. So, but as far as buying him, like I was going to buy him back in this week, and now I'm like, he's got the 57 there. They're playing the Cowboys. Maybe I can afford to wait another week. So.
And I think when you've still got guys like Kaloa Matangi, Madison, and Cam Murray that are still quite affordable, I think you'd probably take those guys over Dave Fafita this week.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's also like so I've got 4 trades left after this week now. So it's also like, well, if I don't get him this week, when do I get him? Or how's that going to work? I can't afford, say, a Koloamatangi, and then to get him in as well, maybe I can't do it. And I think a lot of teams are going to be asking questions on whether they can afford to get these guys in or do some of these trades. And it's probably the hardest thing about, I think, the last 6 weeks of football for Supercoach. There's a lot of really good trades that are good trades, but a lot of coaches can't make them. And it's very frustrating, but it also puts you at a massive advantage if you've got trades or you got the flexibility in your team. And that's what teams need to look for from now on to the run home, because if you've got trades or you've got some flexibility in your side, or you just want to go crazy and go for it and have no trades, it can come off, because we can all see these great trades and hardly any of us can actually make them.
Hey, boys, just a bit of news that's hot off the press. Apparently in the last 10 minutes, they've medically retired Josh Hodgson. Not necessarily Supercoach relevant, although I know that he was in a few people's teams throughout the Vice. But Josh Hodgson has just medically retired as effective immediately.
And I think they're looking to sign Freddie Lussick, trying to sign Freddie Lussick now, aren't they? I think from the Warriors. Parramatta too, and yeah, so interesting.
Quick question, boys. One that's just come through one of my chat groups. A few people have asked, who do we think are the best 2 fullbacks for the run home?
Depends if you bring in Price into it.
Yeah.
I think just purely off draw. Who are you looking at?
Drinkwater's got to be one.
Yeah, Drinkwater probably be my 2.
I think there's an argument there for Teddy, especially the way that he played yesterday, and Roosters have still got a pretty good draw for the run home. I'd be on Teddy myself. Teddy and Drinkwater or Teddy and Trell, if Trell can be fit.
Drinky and Teddy, or Drinky and Ponga for me.
Trell's got the goal kicking over Teddy, which I just, especially with their run, I know they missed an extra game, but yeah, I just think he's got the big ceiling.
It's probably the second one. I think is going to be. We're not going to know until after the season. I think everyone can say Drinkwater, and then just there's 3 or 4 other options that could end up working out. What I will say for Teddy though is that one of the things that he has that a couple of those other guys don't is that they've already done their buys. So if you're if you're going into weeks with one fullback, you're at a massive disadvantage already. And like you're obviously going to have somebody else that comes in for them. But if it's a second row forward that you're coming in as your fourth reserve or a centre wing or something, it's going to be nowhere near a gun fullback. So that's a big advantage if you've got no buys left in the draw. Teddy doesn't have any buys left. I don't think Newcastle have any buys left either for Ponga. Gutherson and South both have a buy the final 2 rounds of the season.
Yeah, good call.
All right, well, that's it for tonight's podcast. Guy, thanks for joining as always.
No worries, boys. Another week of Supercoach, and hopefully we get through to our finals. Only one more week before finals start.
Yeah. Timmy, thanks again.
Good to be on, boys. Some nice green arrows this week. Unfortunately, I think it's too little too late to catch the top 1,000, but we'll keep on keeping on.
And lastly, thanks, Marcus, for coming on from your side of the podcast. If you want to just remind us what days your podcasts are online to obviously listen to.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me, mate. We've got the Supercoach episode that we record on Tuesday nights. It drops on a Wednesday, and also the Talking Footy, which is just all about talking footy. And that one we record on a Thursday or a Wednesday, and it's up before the round kicks off each week. So you can tune into both of those, and they're everywhere: iTunes, SoundCloud, Amazon, Spotify. Just jump on there. But thanks for having me on the bench. I appreciate it, and no doubt I'll talk to you boys again pretty soon again.
Okay, thanks, guys, and good luck for the round. And we'll catch you guys on Tuesday night for the TLT podcast. Till then, have a good night. Thanks.
Stay safe, be good.
Good morning.